What's up, guys? This is Satan Talks About Games, and I'm going to be making videos about probably 80% Nintendo stuff, so that's pretty cool. And today, I'm going to be talking about something that's been on my mind, Switch 2. Now, I will note that I don't use a script, I just talk based on the stuff I know, because that's kind of what I believe in. I don't believe in motorized stuff. I think everything should come from the heart. To move on with the video, Switch 2. It's been a topic of debate, and it's been a topic of controversy. There's quite a bit of people who don't want Switch 2 to come, period. Or they want Switch 2 to come in 2027, because in 2017, Nintendo said that they want the Switch to have a 10-year lifespan. Now, on that note, I will say the lifespan of a console doesn't necessarily mean the lifespan of it being the main console. The lifespan of the 3DS, for example, was 8 years, because it lasted from 2011 to 2019. I think 2020, actually. So maybe 9 years. It was sold for 3 years after the Switch. Now the Switch, if a Switch 2 was to come out in 2024, and the Switch could be sold for 3 more years, and it would have a 10-year lifespan. So I think that's what they meant. And I think they planned on a 2023 or 2024 release all along, even when they said that 10 years. So that's just something important to note. But Switch 2, it's been ramping up in discussion, and it's no secret that it's coming soon. It's probably the worst kept secret in gaming right now. There's talks about dev kits. For example, Nashweedle from Spain. There's a Spanish studio that has a dev kit. Oh boy, who could it be? It's probably Mercury Steam. Because most third-party developers that are not affiliated with Nintendo, such as Platinum Games or Mercury Steam, they're very close to Nintendo, so they're going to get a dev kit. But a lot of third-party studios just don't get dev kits. They just ballpark the specs. So that's very important to note. So Nashweedle says that there's a Spanish studio that has a dev kit, and the Spanish studio he's talked about in the past is Mercury Steam, who's made Metroid Dread, and he said that they're currently working on Metroid Dread 2 to come out in 2025. Or Metroid 6. It's not going to be Dread 2, it's going to be 6. It's going to be another name, just like every 2D Metroid game. So yeah, that's one of the rumors, and one that I personally believe, because we have some credibility there. It's not 100%, it's not like Jeff Grubb is talking about that, but it's something that's believable, it's within plausibility. But another thing that must be mentioned is all the fake leaks, like that codename NX2 in the developer code. That was actually proven fake by some reliable people. So there is people photoshopping stuff, trying to make things look real when they're not, and that's, not a good thing. So I think it's safe to assume if something is easily fakeable, especially when it comes to Switch 2, it's probably fake. So that NX2 thing is fake, but I would not be surprised if the codename is NX2. That's a pretty good guess. It's probably not NX2, it's probably something different, because for the Wii, the codename was Revolution, and the Wii U was basically a Wii 2, but it was still named something different. It was Project Cafe. So it's Revolution and Cafe, those are pretty different to me. So it's probably going to be a new codename. But regardless, I do think Switch 2 dev kits are out there. I do think they've been out there for a while. I do think it's in mass production. And I do think the earliest it could come is March, or early 2024, somewhere around that time. I think the earliest it could come is early 2024. but I think the latest it could come is holiday 2024. I don't think it's going to come out in 2025 anytime. I know there's some people who say 2025, but I don't think so. That's waiting a long time. That's waiting. If it was to come out in March 2025, right? Which would be at the very, very beginning of 2025. That'd be an 8-year lifespan for the Switch. Now, disregarding the Game Boy, just talking about, the general Nintendo console lifespan. It's for home consoles 5 to 6 years, and for handhelds it's anywhere between like 5 to 6.5 years. I think the DS, obviously excluding the Game Boy was an anomaly because it was like the first handheld, and that was just so long ago. Nintendo's so different than they used to be. So basically, the longest aside from the Game Boy, I believe, is the DS, which lasted from I think it was 6.5 years. It didn't hit 7 because it was November 2004, I believe, and then the 3DS came out in February, I believe. So like 6 years and 3 months actually. So we're already past that point with the Switch, and that's handheld lifespans. Now, if we're talking about console lifespans, sure, the NES lasted 7 years. Again, a bit of an anomaly because that was their first thing. But the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo 64, the GameCube lasted 5 years. The Wii, being very, very successful, still only lasted 6 years. The Wii U obviously lasted like 4.5 years. But that was also an anomaly. So I do think the Switch, the earliest it could come out in my eyes, because it's not coming out this year. That's kind of hopium. The earliest it could come out is March, I'd say, to end the fiscal year, because they're not going to release it in January or February. That's just not going to happen. So it would be March, which would be spring, and that would be 7+ years of Switch come March 3rd. So I'd say we're about overdue. Now, Switch 2. When do I think it's going to release? It's hard to say, because Switch 2, like I said, it's kind of a wild card when it's going to release in 2024. Does Nintendo want to let momentum continue? Do they want to squeeze all they can out of the Switch? Or is Switch 2 more of a in-the-family thing, like with Switch Lite, and Switch OLED? Because if it's in the family, I think it could come out earlier. I think they'd be comfortable with that. Another example for what I think Switch 2 is going to be like is Game Boy Color. Game Boy Color was pretty much a next-gen jump, but it was still considered within the family with Game Boy, and it's even considered together when it comes to sales. So Game Boy Color is technically a part of the Game Boy family, but it's its own generation, really. Sure, it's backwards compatible, and it's got the Game Boy name, but the Game Boy Advance is considered its own generation. So I think Game Boy Color should be considered. And that's what it was, but it was also a mid-gen refresh and a next-gen at the same time. It had the power of a next-gen console. It had color that required a lot more processing. But it supported everything the Game Boy did. It actually took every Game Boy game and made it look better. It was amazing. It gave everything color. So I do believe that Switch 2 is going to be like that. In other words, to put an end to my rambling, Switch 2 is going to be a mid-gen refresh and a next-gen console at the same time. Meaning, I believe Switch will be supported for 2, 3, 4 more years. Now, if they wait until 2025 to release Switch 2, then it might be more of a hard cutoff, right? So I think the best time actually would have been this year, like the late 2023 for Switch 2. I think that was the best time. But considering that's not really a possibility anymore, it's not anything to think about, Early 2024 is probably the best. The early time works out for them. They could build up games and install base, get ready for the holiday, bolster demand. I think an early time of the year is a decent time to release a console because if it releases in the holiday, you're going to go out of stock right away. You're going to have a PS5 situation. Chips are a little easier to get their hands on than they were when PS5 launched, obviously. Actually, chip prices have crashed. But still, there's scalpers out now ever since the PS5, and they will buy 50 million Switches and sell them. It's just going to happen unless Nintendo does a thing like Sony does, where they only allow you to buy one or two, I believe it is. So they could do that, and they could prevent scalpers, and I think there's a chance they will, but assuming they don't, early in the year is probably a good time to release a console because it's going to go out of stock either way. So you might as well release it early on and be able to bolster supply for the holiday. What's just as important as the hardware itself, maybe even more important than the hardware itself, software. Switch 2 needs a good first year to establish itself in the market. Switch is 2017. That's still the best year to Switch. I mean, 2023 so far is pretty good, but 2017, I mean, come on. Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, Splatoon 2, they had all that stuff. Some big high-profile releases. Sure, some other years have had more games, but have they had more high-profile games? I don't think so. All in all, I believe Switch 2 is coming out next year, and it's either going to be March or sometime in the second half. I believe when Nikkei reported a mid-year release, I think that means like September. Uh, they wouldn't release the console in like June or July or August. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think they meant September, which would mean the second half, which would practically mean holiday 2024. So I do believe it's March or somewhere between September and November. I think that's the time Switch 2 can release. And I think because they're releasing a lot of remasters and ports and all that this year, more so than ever before, I do believe that there's going to be a big first year lineup for Switch 2. I just think that's the case. I think they're trying to repeat 2017. And I think it's going to work. I think it will. I think this is going to be their first console where they make a sequel to the console and it does well. All they need to do is keep the hybrid thing and just innovate on the power and make the Joy-Cons better. Please make the Joy-Cons better. Maybe even a little magnetic non-collision sticks. Please. But yeah, thanks for watching everyone, and see ya.